Elliot left for a year-long business trip. When he returned, his wife Monica was mysteriously pregnant. Feeling betrayed, he abandoned her without a second thought. But years later, a DNA test would reveal a truth so impossible it left everyone in shock. Watch till the end to uncover the twist, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Elliot Grayson was gone for exactly 1 year, 3 weeks, and 2 days. When he left, he promised Monica that nothing would change, that their love was strong enough to survive the distance. She had believed him. She had stood at the airport, watching his plane take off, holding on to his words as if they were unshakable truths. But when he returned, the world he had left behind was unrecognizable. The moment he stepped through the front door, suitcase still in hand, his breath caught in his throat. Monica stood in the kitchen, her back to him, arranging plates on the table as if everything was perfectly normal. But nothing was normal. His eyes locked onto the undeniable swell of her stomach, the round curve of pregnancy 6 months along. His body turned cold, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Monica heard him before she saw him. She turned with a warm smile, one that vanished the second she met his gaze. The silence between them thickened, stretching unbearably. "Elliot," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You're home." He barely registered the words. His entire body felt like it had been ripped apart and stitched back together wrong. His mind screamed for an explanation, but all he could say was, "Who?" Monica's face twisted in horror. "No, Elliot, no one. I swear to you, I don't know how this happened." Her desperation only made it worse. His chest tightened, suffocating under the weight of betrayal. It didn't matter what she said. He knew the truth. He had been gone for a year. She was 6 months pregnant. The math wasn't difficult. He took a step back, his heart pounding, disgust clawing its way up his throat. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" His voice was low, dangerous, laced with something broken. "No, please, Elliot. I swear to you, there was never anyone else." Tears filled her eyes, but they did nothing to soften the sharp edges of his fury. His laughter was hollow, bitter. "So what are you telling me, Monica? That this is some kind of miracle? That the baby just appeared out of nowhere?" He shook his head, jaw tightening. "Don't lie to me. Not now." Monica reached for him, but he recoiled. The air between them shattered into something irreparable. She could see it, the exact moment he decided, the moment he stopped believing in her. His hand clenched around the strap of his bag, and then just like that, he was gone. The door slammed shut behind him, and with it, everything they had built collapsed. The divorce papers came swiftly. There was no drawn-out fight, no attempts at reconciliation, just cold signatures on a page, finalizing a decision that never should have been made. Monica had begged, pleaded for him to listen, but Elliot had already made up his mind. The scandal followed her everywhere, whispers behind her back, judgment in people's eyes, the weight of a secret she couldn't explain. Alone and abandoned, she gave birth to a baby girl, Sienna, and poured every ounce of her love into her child. Sienna grew up different. She was too perceptive, too intelligent for her age. By the time she was 3, she could solve puzzles meant for 10-year-olds. By 5, she asked questions that Monica didn't know how to answer. There were nights Monica would wake up to find Sienna sitting by the window, staring at the stars as if they whispered secrets only she could hear. But none of that mattered. Sienna was hers, her miracle, her proof that love could still exist, even after the world had tried to break her. Then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. Sienna collapsed. One moment, she was laughing, chasing butterflies in the garden. The next, she was on the ground, her tiny body convulsing, her lips turning blue. Monica screamed, rushing to her daughter's side as panic ripped through her chest. The hospital was a blur of rushing doctors, endless tests, hushed conversations in hallways, and then the devastating news. Sienna's condition was genetic. She needed a donor. She needed her biological father. Monica stared at the doctor, the weight of the past crashing down on her. There was only one person who could help. The man who had walked away. The man who hated her. The man who had never even met his own daughter. Elliot, reaching out to Elliot felt like reopening a wound that had barely scabbed over. Monica had spent years trying to forget the pain, trying to accept that the man she had once loved had abandoned her without ever looking back. But now, she had no choice. Her fingers trembled as she dialed his number. her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every rational thought. She braced herself for rejection, for resentment, for the cold voice she knew would answer on the other end. When Elliot finally picked up, his voice was sharp, guarded. "Monica?" She closed her eyes, trying to keep her voice steady. "Elliot, it's about Sienna." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with years of unresolved pain. Monica forced herself to continue, pushing through the knot in her throat. "She's sick. She needs a genetic match for a donor. You're the only one who—" He cut her off before she could finish. His voice was colder than she had ever heard it. "You expect me to believe she's mine?" The accusation stung like a fresh wound. 7 years had passed, and he still didn't believe her. Monica's grip on the phone tightened as she swallowed the lump of frustration and heartbreak. "She is," she whispered. "I have proof." Elliot hesitated. The pause stretched between them, filled with ghosts of the past. Then finally, he exhaled. "Send me the test. I'll take it." The days that followed were unbearable. Monica found herself staring at the envelope containing the results, unable to open it. The weight of everything, her past with Elliot, the years of loneliness, the fight to raise Sienna alone, pressed down on her chest. When she finally gathered the courage, she tore open the seal, unfolding the paper with trembling hands. And then the world stopped. The results weren't just a match. They showed something impossible. Sienna was 100% his child. There was no ambiguity, no room for doubt. Elliot was her biological father in every way that science could confirm, but the deeper analysis revealed something far more unsettling. There were no paternal DNA markers, no evidence that Elliot's genetic material had ever been physically introduced into Monica's pregnancy. Sienna had been conceived entirely from Monica's DNA, yet carried Elliot's trait. Monica's breath hitched. Her hands shook as she reread the results over and over, hoping she had misunderstood, that somehow science had made a mistake. But the numbers didn't lie. This wasn't just improbable, it was biologically impossible. The results suggested something that defied nature itself. Parthenogenesis. Monica had read about it before, a form of asexual reproduction where an embryo develops from an unfertilized egg. It was something that happened in some reptiles, amphibians, even insects. But not in mammals, not in humans. In all scientific studies, parthenogenesis had never produced a viable human pregnancy. It wasn't just rare, it was impossible. Yet somehow Sienna existed. Before she could even begin to process the implications, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Her pulse quickened as she hesitated, staring at the screen, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. Slowly she answered, bringing the phone to her ear. "Hello?" A woman's voice, low and urgent, filled the silence. "You don't know me," the stranger said. "But I know what happened to you." Monica's stomach twisted. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the words that made her blood run cold. "They're coming for her. You need to run." Monica's grip on the phone tightened as the air in the room seemed to thin. The voice on the other end was sharp and urgent, but she could barely process what she was hearing. "They're coming for her. You need to run." Her heart pounded, each beat like a drum against her ribs. She forced herself to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Who is coming?" "I don't have time to explain," the woman said. "But they know you've seen the results. They've been watching. If you stay where you are, they'll take her." Monica turned toward the living room, her stomach twisting into knots. Sienna was curled up on the couch, completely unaware that her entire existence had just become a target. The thought of someone taking her, of losing the only person she had fought for, suffered for, made her knees weak. "Who is they?" she whispered. "What do they want with my daughter?" A sharp inhale crackled over the line, followed by the hurried rustling of papers, as if the caller was flipping through files. "It's not just your daughter," the woman finally said. "Sienna was never supposed to exist. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. It was engineered." Monica staggered back, the weight of those words pressing down on her like a crushing force. "No," she breathed. "That's not possible. I wasn't part of." "You didn't have to be," the woman cut in. "You were chosen." Her head spun. This couldn't be real. How could someone have chosen her for something like this? A sickening realization crept into her mind, the fertility checkup. She had gone for a simple test when she and Elliot were struggling to conceive. They had drawn blood, run hormone screenings, even taken cell samples. She had signed a waiver, thinking nothing of it at the time. It had been routine, or so she had thought. Project Genesis, the woman continued, her voice tight. It was a medical experiment run under the cover of a fertility research initiative. Thousands of women participated unknowingly, just like you. Most of them never conceived. The process wasn't viable. Monica swallowed hard. But I did. Yes, the woman said, and your daughter is the only one who survived. A chill ran down Monica's spine. Listen to me carefully, the woman continued. They don't just want to study her. They want to take her back. You have to leave now. Monica's pulse was pounding in her ears, her brain unable to keep up with the storm of information. Wait, where do I go? Who are you? But before she could get an answer, the line went dead. For a moment she stood there, frozen, the silence ringing louder than the voice had. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, she ran toward Sienna, scooping her up from the couch. Baby, we have to go. Sienna blinked up at her, confused. Mommy, what's wrong? Monica forced a shaky smile, trying to keep her panic buried beneath the surface. We're going on a little trip, sweetheart, okay? She reached for her purse, shoving cash into her pocket. They had to move. Now, then she heard it. A car engine. Slow, deliberate. Stopping right outside the house. Monica's body went rigid. Through the thin blinds, she saw a black SUV idling at the curb. Her blood turned to ice. They were already here. The front doorknob turned. Monica didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed Sienna and bolted toward the back door, her feet barely touching the floor as she ran. Just as she reached the kitchen, the front door burst open with a violent crack. She didn't stop to see who had come in. She threw open the back door and sprinted into the yard, the cold night air slamming against her skin. A shout rang out behind her. Go around the back! Monica's heart lurched. They were coming. She raced through the yard, Sienna clinging tightly to her, and darted toward the side gate. It was locked. She cursed under her breath, turning to scan her options. The fence, too high. The alley, too exposed. A shadow moved at the corner of her eye. A man in black rounding the side of the house. Mommy? Sienna's voice was small against her shoulder, but Monica couldn't stop. She spun, darting toward the neighbor's yard, her fingers fumbling to unlatch the wooden gate. It creaked as she pushed it open, slipping through just as footsteps pounded behind her. Stop! No chance. Monica ran harder, cutting through the neighbor's backyard, her lungs burning. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was that she had to keep moving. Then, suddenly, headlights. Her heart stopped. A car sped down the alley, stopping just inches from where she stood. The window rolled down, and there, behind the wheel, was the last person she ever expected to see. Elliot, his face was tight, unreadable, but his voice left no room for argument. Get in. Monica didn't hesitate. She yanked open the door, climbed in with Sienna, and before the door even shut, Elliot was flooring the gas pedal. The SUV behind them skidded onto the street, headlights blazing as it tore after them. Monica's breath came in short gasps. How did you— Your call, Elliot said, gripping the wheel, his knuckles white. I traced it. I knew something was wrong. Her chest heaved. You believe me now? Elliot's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror where the black SUV was closing in. Let's just say, he muttered, I have a lot of regrets. He yanked the wheel hard, cutting into an empty side street. Tires screeched as the SUV tried to follow, but Elliot was already accelerating, navigating the darkened roads with a precision that told Monica this wasn't his first time running from something. She swallowed, holding Sienna tighter. Where are we going? To someone who has answers, Elliot said. Someone who's going to tell us exactly what the hell they did to our daughter. The chase wasn't over. It was just beginning. The car sped through the darkened streets, tires screeching as Elliot weaved through intersections, each turn an attempt to lose the black SUV tailing them. Monica clutched Sienna tightly, her heart pounding as she turned to glance behind them. The headlights of their pursuers loomed closer, unwavering, relentless. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Her daughter. Elliot's grip on the wheel was tight, his jaw clenched as he pressed harder on the gas. We can't outrun them forever, he muttered. We need a plan. Monica's voice was laced with urgency. Where are we going? Elliot's eyes flickered toward her before locking back onto the road. Dr. Celeste Rivera. She's the only person who might have answers. She used to work for Genesis Biotech before she went underground. Monica's breath hitched. Genesis Biotech? The name sent a chill through her. The woman on the phone had mentioned Project Genesis. It wasn't just a theory anymore. It was real. Elliot nodded grimly. She was one of their lead researchers before she disappeared. She knew something big. I started looking into her when I got your call. She's been in hiding for years, but I found a contact who knows where she is. Monica tightened her grip on Sienna, her mind racing. And you trust this woman? I don't trust anyone, Elliot admitted. But she might be the only shot we have at figuring out what the hell is going on. The SUV behind them suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. Monica barely had time to react before a loud bang rang through the night, a gunshot. The back windshield exploded into shards, glass raining down on them as Sienna let out a terrified scream. Shit! Elliot cursed, swerving violently to the right, barely missing a parked car. He yanked the wheel, making a sharp turn down an empty alleyway. The SUV skidded behind them, tires screeching as it followed. Monica shielded Sienna with her arms. We can't keep running like this. Elliot's expression was set in stone. We won't have to. At the end of the alley, he slammed the brakes and spun the wheel, sending the car into a sharp drift before killing the engine. In a single motion, he reached over and grabbed Monica's hand. Get out! Now! Without hesitation, Monica threw the door open, pulling Sienna into her arms as she ran. Elliot was right behind them. The moment they were clear, he slammed the door shut and shoved a brick against the gas pedal. The car lurched forward, rolling toward the alley's dead end. The SUV burst into the alley seconds later. But before it could slow down, Elliot's car slammed into the dumpster at full force, igniting the gas tank in a fiery explosion. The blast rocked the alley, sending the pursuers skidding to a halt as flames consumed the wreckage. Elliot grabbed Monica's wrist and yanked her into the shadows. Move! They ran, slipping through a chain-link fence into the back of a warehouse district. The burning car bought them time, but Monica knew this wasn't over. It was nearly an hour later when they reached the small, run-down house on the outskirts of the city. The place was tucked away behind overgrown trees, barely visible from the road. It didn't look like much, but something about it sent a strange sense of unease through Monica's chest. Elliot knocked 3 times, a pause, then 2 more knocks. A small slit in the door slid open, revealing a pair of sharp, weary eyes. The woman behind them looked aged by stress rather than time. Her gaze darted between Monica, Sienna, and Elliot before she finally muttered, "You shouldn't have come here." "We didn't have a choice," Elliot shot back. "They're after us. We need answers." The woman, Dr. Celeste Rivera, sighed before unlatching the door. "Then get inside. Quickly." The moment they stepped in, Monica felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The house was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old books and something metallic, like antiseptic. The walls were lined with stacks of papers, files, and what looked like medical charts. Celeste wasted no time. She turned to Monica, her gaze sharp. "I know why you're here, and I know what they want." Monica's stomach twisted. "Then tell me, what did they do to my daughter?" The doctor inhaled slowly, as if steadying herself. "You need to understand something first. What happened to Sienna wasn't an accident. It was by design." She moved toward a cluttered desk, shuffling through papers before pulling out a file and flipping it open. She laid it in front of them. Inside were scientific diagrams, genetic models, and a classified document stamped with the words Project Genesis. She tapped the page. "Do you know what parthenogenesis is?" Monica swallowed. It's when an embryo develops without fertilization." "Correct," Celeste nodded. "It happens in some species, lizards, insects, fish, but never in mammals." She met Monica's gaze. "Until now." Monica felt her breath catch. "Are you saying?" Celeste sighed. "Sienna was created using controlled parthenogenesis. Genesis Biotech had been experimenting for years, trying to find a way to induce it in human subjects. The goal was to create self-replicating genetics, offspring without the need for sperm. But every attempt failed. Elliot's voice was tight. "Except for Monica." Celeste nodded. "They didn't expect you to conceive, Monica. They were monitoring you. When your pregnancy was confirmed, they let it continue, because Sienna was the first viable subject." Monica's body turned cold. "So she's an experiment?" "No," Celeste said firmly. She's more than that. She's a genetic breakthrough, the only one of her kind. Monica shook her head, trying to grasp the impossible truth. But she has Elliot's traits. How is that possible if there was no fertilization? Celeste hesitated before answering. That's the part I don't fully understand. Genetically, Elliot is Sienna's father. But scientifically, it shouldn't be possible. It's as if your body somehow replicated traits from someone you were closest to, someone whose DNA had already been introduced into your system. Monica's mind reeled. So, she's a biological impossibility. Celeste's face darkened. Exactly, and that's why Genesis Biotech will never stop coming for her. Silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of everything they had just learned. Then Sienna, who had been quiet the entire time, looked up at them and whispered something that sent chills through Monica's entire body. "They're here." The room fell deathly silent. Sienna stood near the corner of the cluttered study, her small frame barely visible in the dim light, but her voice was steady. Monica's heart nearly stopped. She turned to the window, her breath catching as she saw the faintest movement outside. Shadows shifted between the trees, black fabric flickering between the branches, a flash of metal, the subtle gleam of something unnatural in the darkness. Her body turned cold. They had found them. Elliot was already moving. He pulled the blinds shut in a swift motion, his body tense, muscles coiled as if preparing for a fight. "How did they find us this fast?" he muttered, his voice sharp. Celeste cursed under her breath, shoving papers into a bag. "They must have tracked the car you arrived in. I told you, Genesis Biotech doesn't lose its property." Monica's blood boiled at the word. She spun toward Celeste, her voice tight with rage. "She is not their property." Her fists clenched, the very thought of Sienna being seen as something other than her child, making her stomach twist. Celeste didn't respond. She was already reaching under her desk, pulling out a small black device. She pressed a switch, and suddenly, every light in the room flickered before the electronics cut out. The hum of the fridge stopped. The soft ticking of the clock vanished. Everything went silent. "I just killed their signal," she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "But it won't last long. We need to go, now." Elliot nodded sharply. "Back exit?" Celeste was already moving toward a hidden panel behind the bookcase. "There's an underground tunnel that leads to an abandoned road about 2 miles away. It's risky, but it's our only shot." Monica grabbed Sienna, pulling her close as the gravity of their situation sank in. There was no debating, no second-guessing. This was their only chance. "What happens if they get inside before we're gone?" Celeste didn't answer. Then, as if the universe was determined to answer Monica's question in the cruelest way possible, the front door exploded inward. The tunnel was damp and narrow, the scent of mildew clinging to the stale air. Monica held Sienna close as they rushed forward, their footsteps muffled by the compacted dirt beneath them. Celeste led the way, flashlight in hand, her sharp breaths the only sound in the confined space. Behind them, Elliot kept pace, moving with the rigid posture of a man ready for a fight. Above them, muffled shouts echoed from the house they had just fled. Genesis Biotech's men had broken in. Every instinct in Monica's body screamed for her to move faster. Her heart pounded as she tightened her grip on Sienna, her daughter's small hands clutching onto her shirt as they ran. The tunnel walls seemed to close in around them, but she pushed forward, focusing only on the path ahead. "We're almost there," Celeste whispered, leading them toward a rusted metal door at the end of the tunnel. She pressed a hidden panel on the side, and after a moment of grinding gears, the lock released with a hiss. The door swung open, revealing the moonlit stretch of empty road beyond. "Go," Celeste urged. They ran. The night air was freezing, but Monica barely noticed. She focused only on getting Sienna as far away as possible. The dirt road stretched ahead, lined with abandoned warehouses and forgotten buildings, their one chance at disappearing. Then, behind them, gunfire. Monica's breath caught as she turned. The tunnel entrance erupted in chaos, tactical men pouring out, their weapons drawn, moving fast. A bullet ricocheted off the ground just feet from where she stood. Elliot didn't hesitate. He grabbed Monica's wrist and yanked her forward. "Run!" They sprinted toward a vehicle parked under the cover of trees, a black SUV Celeste had hidden for emergencies. She threw open the doors, shoving her bag into the back. "In, now!" she barked. Monica climbed into the back seat, Sienna pressed against her. Elliot slid into the driver's seat without hesitation, slamming the gas pedal. The tires screeched as they sped down the abandoned road, dust kicking up behind them. Bullets whizzed past the car, one cracking the back window. Monica shielded Sienna with her arms, her heart hammering in her chest. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the roaring engine. Celeste's voice was tight. "Somewhere they won't find us." Elliot's jaw was set, his grip on the wheel turning his knuckles white. "That's getting harder by the second." Monica held Sienna tighter, pressing a kiss to her forehead, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. They had escaped, but for how long? Genesis Biotech wasn't giving up, and Monica knew this was only the beginning. Hours passed in tense silence as they drove deep into the wilderness, far from the city, far from prying eyes. The safe house was a small, dilapidated cabin nestled in the dense forest. Temporary, but their best option. Monica carried Sienna inside, exhaustion heavy in her limbs. Celeste wasted no time. She spread files across a wooden table, her fingers shaking as she flipped through page after page of classified research. "You need to see this," she said, her voice tight. Monica and Elliot leaned in, scanning the documents. The more they read, the more horrifying the truth became. Project Genesis wasn't just about creating children without fathers. It was about designing the future of human reproduction. Celeste pointed to a heavily redacted section. Genesis Biotech's real goal was to develop a way for humanity to sustain itself without traditional fertilization, to create the perfect human race, engineered from the strongest genetic material. Elliot's voice was cold. "And Sienna?" Celeste hesitated before meeting his gaze. She was proof that it worked. Monica's stomach churned. "So they want to take her back because she's the first success?" "No," Celeste said, her expression grave. "They want to take her back because she's evolving." A heavy silence fell over the room. Monica's breath came in slow, shaky exhales. "What do you mean, evolving?" Celeste turned to Sienna, her gaze unreadable. "Have you ever noticed her doing things that seemed beyond human capability?" Monica's lips parted in shock. The sharp intelligence, the eerie intuition, the way Sienna always seemed to know things before they happened. She turned to her daughter, fear coiling in her chest. "Sienna, honey, has anything strange been happening to you?" Sienna looked at her mother, eyes impossibly calm. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Monica felt the floor beneath her tilt. "What, baby?" Sienna hesitated, glancing down at her hands before whispering, "I hear them." Elliot stiffened. "Hear who?" Sienna lifted her gaze, her expression unreadable. "The others." Cold dread slithered through Monica's veins. Celeste's face paled. "My God." She reached for another file, her hands trembling as she flipped to a specific page. When she turned it around, Monica felt the blood drain from her body. A list of other subjects, names, birth dates, experiment statuses, all stamped with the same word, terminated. Before Monica could respond, a distant noise made her heart stop. The low rumble of approaching helicopters. They had found them. The distant rumble of helicopters sent a shiver through Monica's spine. Her body tensed as she locked eyes with Elliot, both of them frozen in the dimly lit cabin. The low hum grew louder, the rhythmic pounding of rotor blades slicing through the silence. They were here. Celeste moved first, shoving the files into a duffel bag, her movements frantic but precise. "We have to move, now," she said, her voice clipped. She reached for a hidden compartment beneath the wooden floorboards, pulling out a black case. The snap of the latch echoed in the tight space as she revealed a handgun, spare magazines, and an emergency comm device. Elliot grabbed the gun without hesitation, checking the clip before tucking it into his waistband. His face was unreadable, but Monica knew. He wasn't going to let them take Sienna without a fight. Monica, clutching Sienna tightly, forced herself to stay focused. "Where do we go? We can't outrun them forever." Celeste's eyes flickered with urgency. "We don't run anymore. We end this." She turned to Elliot. "We need to get to the main server farm at Genesis Biotech. If we expose their files, everything, every experiment, every crime, they won't be able to cover it up. We take them down at the source." Elliot nodded. "Then let's move before we lose the chance." But before anyone could take a step, a blinding floodlight illuminated the cabin from outside. A deafening voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "Step out of the cabin with your hands up. You are surrounded. There is nowhere left to run." Sienna clung to Monica, her small body trembling. "Mommy," she whispered, "they're not here to take me. They're here to erase me." Monica felt her blood run cold. Elliot peered through the blinds. Armed men in black tactical gear spread out, their rifles aimed at the house, too many to fight head-on. Celeste's voice was urgent. "We use the tunnel. It leads out into the woods, gives us a head start. We split up, regroup later." Elliot turned to Monica. "You and Sienna go first. Celeste and I will cover the exit." Monica wanted to argue, to tell him they should stay together, but there was no time. She bent down, cupping Sienna's face. "Baby, I need you to be strong, okay? We're gonna get out of this." Sienna's dark eyes locked onto hers. "I know," she said softly, "but not all of us are." The words sent a shiver down Monica's spine, but before she could process them, Elliot pulled open the hatch. "Go!" Monica and Sienna disappeared into the darkness. Hours later, after a grueling trek through the forest and an exhausting drive through back roads, Monica and Sienna arrived at their rendezvous point, a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Elliot and Celeste were already there, waiting, battered but alive. Celeste wasted no time. She spread blueprints of Genesis Biotech's headquarters across a rusted metal table, tracing her finger over key entry points. "Security is tight, but there's a blind spot in the north wing. If we can breach it, we can reach the central servers and upload the data." Elliot crossed his arms. "And how exactly do we do that without getting shot?" Celeste's lips pressed into a thin line. "We bring them to us." Monica tensed. "You want to lure them in?" Celeste nodded. "We send an anonymous distress signal from inside the facility, make them think something is going wrong. When security responds, we slip in and take what we need." Elliot exhaled sharply. "Risky as hell." "It's our only shot," Celeste said. A heavy silence fell over the room before Monica finally spoke. "Let's do it." They had come too far to stop now. The infiltration went smoothly, at first. They slipped past security, weaving through the sterile white hallways of Genesis Biotech's headquarters. The hum of servers vibrated through the walls as Celeste worked quickly, hacking into the system. Monica stood watch, her pulse hammering as she scanned the empty corridor. Then, alarms blared. The plan had worked too well. Security flooded the building, boots pounding against the floor as Genesis operatives stormed the hallways. Elliot pulled out his gun, pushing Monica behind him. "We're out of time." Celeste's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Almost there. Just a few more seconds." The first shot rang out, shattering the glass panel beside them. Elliot fired back, taking out the nearest guard. Monica grabbed Sienna, shielding her with her body as chaos erupted. "Got it," Celeste yelled, slamming a USB drive into her pocket. "It's all here. Every file, every experiment. If this gets out, Genesis is finished." They ran. Bullets chased them down the hallway. Elliot took out 2 more guards, but more kept coming. Monica's breath came in short gasps as they neared the exit. Just a few more steps. Then, a cold voice stopped them in their tracks. "Going somewhere?" Monica turned, her heart stopping at the sight of Dr. Adrian Vaughn, the man behind Project Genesis. He stood calmly, hands folded behind his back, flanked by 2 armed men. Elliot aimed his gun at him. "Move," Dr. Vaughn smiled. "Shoot me, and you won't make it 10 feet. Monica felt Sienna tense beside her. Then, in a quiet voice, her daughter spoke. "I know what you did." Dr. Vaughn's eyes flickered with amusement. "Is that so?" Sienna stepped forward, her small form eerily steady. "You tried to make more like me, but it didn't work. They all died." Vaughn's expression froze. Sienna lifted her chin, her voice calm. "You were scared of me. You're still scared of me." Monica's breath hitched. Vaughn's eyes darkened. "You are an anomaly, a mistake, one we will correct." Sienna's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "No," she whispered, "you won't." Then, without warning, the lights flickered. The air itself seemed to vibrate. The guards around Vaughn staggered back, eyes wide with fear. Vaughn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elliot grabbed Monica's arm. "What the hell is happening?" Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. "She's shutting them down." Sienna's small hands clenched at her sides, her gaze locked onto Vaughn. The air in the room grew unbearably heavy, and then the armed men collapsed. Their bodies hit the floor like puppets with their strings cut. Vaughn staggered back, fear flashing across his face for the first time. Sienna exhaled. "It's over." A second later, alarms blared throughout the building. Elliot grabbed Sienna, pulling her into his arms. "We have to go." They ran for the exit, sprinting through the chaos as the building descended into pure disorder. Genesis Biotech was falling apart. The sun was rising when they finally reached safety. The files were released, leaked to every major news network, government agency, and human rights organization across the world. Genesis Biotech was finished. The revelations sparked outrage. Public trials were launched, secret labs were raided, and the world finally learned the truth. As for Dr. Adrian Vaughn, he vanished. When authorities stormed Genesis Biotech's headquarters, they found it in ruins. The system had been completely wiped, files shredded, research destroyed, but Vaughn was gone. No body, no trace, just an empty office and a single note left behind on his desk. "She is not the last." The words sent a chill through Monica when she heard them. She knew what it meant. Genesis had backups. This wasn't over, not completely. Somewhere out there, remnants of the experiment still existed. And if Vaughn was alive, he would be looking for a way to start again. But for now, they were free. Monica sat on the hood of the car, watching as Sienna played in the golden light of dawn, her laughter breaking through the remnants of fear still clinging to Monica's chest. Elliot leaned against the car beside her, his face unreadable, as if caught between the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. "Do you think we're safe now?" Monica asked, her voice quiet. Elliot exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving Sienna. "For now." She turned to him, searching his face. "And us?" For the first time in years, his expression softened. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing against hers before lacing them together. "I want to try." Monica held his gaze, letting the warmth of his touch settle something deep inside her. "Me too." The past had broken them, shattered their trust, torn them apart in ways neither of them had thought they could ever repair. But here they were, not whole, not perfect, but together. And as Sienna ran toward them, her laughter filling the air, Monica finally let herself believe it. They had survived, and for the first time in years, they had a future. What do you think happened to Dr. Vaughn? Do you believe Project Genesis is truly over, or could there be more secrets waiting to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping narratives filled with suspense, mystery, and unexpected twists. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more powerful stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. We'll see you next time.